We now return to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the radio show discussing the honest truth about Illinois policy and politics. Here's AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Cole Lauterbach, reporter for the Illinois News Network on this edition of Illinois Rising. We just spoke with Kristen McQuarrie from the Chicago Tribune about the budget, $7 billion, $7.5 billion unconstitutionally unbalanced that was rammed through the House this week. And this is a good tangent because it speaks to businesses and, frankly, families fleeing Illinois for friendlier confines. And we've got a bit of a celebrated case. This has been reported widely, including by the Illinois Policy Institute. It's the business Hoist lift truck, which left Bedford Park last summer to go to East Chicago, Indiana. The company needed more space for manufacturing operations, and going across the border was their best option, picking up and moving their best option. This is not unfamiliar, but perhaps an instructive case study in terms of what ails Illinois from a public policy perspective. And to give more detail on that, we're now happy to be joined by Vincent Flasca, who is the new business development and property manager for Hoist, as well as the company's CFO, Dan Kassow. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
And this was a jump ball for either Vincent or Dan. What was the decision? Give us the calculus, if you will, the decision to move from Bedford Park to Indiana.
So referring to kind of the incentives when we looked at both packages or when we decided to move, or kind of how it started.
Yeah, well, it's one thing to discuss what kind of incentives Indiana offered, but just in terms of thinking about continuing to do business in Illinois and try and expand at Bedford Park or some other community that would have the space that you needed to accommodate your business, the kind of that weighing that you did in terms of deciding to stay or deciding to go.
So the reality came down to a couple different factors. The first was certainly the incentive packages that were offered by both Indiana and then attempting to get Illinois to counter with their own package. Unfortunately, Illinois had offered a smaller package and then ultimately took that package off the table, even though they didn't realize we were going to Indiana. And we were told that those incentive packages were just no longer being offered to Illinois companies, even if it meant they were going to leave. So it made the decision fairly straightforward, but it was additionally coupled with the items of worker comp and the reforms that don't exist in Illinois that need to, and property taxes that we're all faced with owning property in Cook County.
Guys, so it's been a couple months now since you've made the move and you've set down roots in Indiana, and you're not totally there. You're kind of straddling the border between Illinois and Indiana. But how has your time in Indiana been dealing with the business environment, interactions with government there, as compared to your long time here in Bedford Park, Illinois?
So when we first started moving the company, we ran into some roadblocks. Typically, this region, if you want to call it that, it's been big steel mills, large companies, union workers. All of them, they open up, they shut down. They haven't had a lot of private, family-owned businesses move here from Illinois in quite a while, certainly not some our size. So there was a little bit of pushback just from the community because they didn't really think we were going to do what we said we were going to do. They were offering up incentives as well. We finally got past that, full circle when we had our open house. We had a bunch of the community members here, and even the mayor said, he was running into people that, were neighbors that were unemployed, and now they have jobs with us. So that's really only the pushback we've done, was just the initial actually getting the development done, because we did about $40 million in redevelopment for the site. Other than that, we just had a recent incident with workers' comp, which Dan can talk about, which is this week, and I was surprised.
So in Illinois, for the last 18 years that I've worked with the Flasca family, I've been actively involved with worker comp claims in the process through the Thompson Center. And this week, we had a minor incident in this new facility in Indiana, and I received a phone call from the woman that runs the Indiana Worker Comp Board. And I equated it to talking to your favorite aunt. She was polite, respectful, and we had a 20-minute conversation on their process in Indiana, and it's very straightforward. The goal is, if someone gets hurt, that you figure out the best way to make sure they're provided care and how you get them back to work as quick as possible. It's not about having attorneys chase companies for payouts and percentages based on settlements that they can work through the system. You're dealing with a culture where you have a government body talking directly to the company that employs the person, figuring out the best solution to ensure that they're paid while they're off, and when they can come back to work, that they have a place to sit, that they can do light duty, or they return back to our factory to do work that they're paid to do. And it's just a completely different experience in Indiana compared to the legal process that we were put through over and over again in the state of Illinois.
And how do you quantify that cultural difference in terms of, with respect to your bottom line, your workers' comp costs in Indiana versus Illinois, and maybe even just using that as a case study?
We left the state of Illinois with $1.3 million in premium and exposure on an annual basis, and that could go north depending on experience. If there was a larger claim, it would be on us. In Indiana, we successfully signed with a carrier that's costing us $250,000 annually.
Wow.
So it's a significant savings of $1 million to our business a year.
Well, it's not just it's not just $1 million. I mean, it's a factor of 6. That is, so just in terms of scaling that up or down for other business owners listening to that, that's massive.
We agree.
And many other heavy manufacturing or light manufacturing companies won't get insured in Illinois for their workers' comp. The same company that we're using now, and a lot of the ones that we got quotes from, wouldn't insure us in Illinois. Now you move 30 minutes east, and now we're suddenly insurable. It's a little surprising, and you can only assume it has to do with the system.
Well, so, gentlemen, hearing that story just in the area of workers' comp, in addition to all the other drivers of cost for your business, even if the incentive packages were the same, even if Illinois would have offered the same incentive package that Indiana offered you, would you have not made the decision to move anyway?
We likely would have still made the move because there's 2 things that are sitting out there that are uncertain. 3 if you include worker comp. But let's assume worker comp was fixed and there was reforms through the state legislature that fixed it. If that occurred, that would have been one of the factors that we would have appreciated seeing. But the Cook County property tax problem doesn't appear to have any resolution in sight. So that's a major driver that would have kept us from going. And ultimately, the uncertainty of what's going to happen with Illinois income tax. We see the numbers that are out there, the $7 billion gap that keeps getting discussed. What's going to make up that gap if they're able to get to a budget? It's going to be tax dollars, and that's ultimately going to fall on the heads of our employees and the corporations that exist inside the state.
Right. You mentioned the tax burden on not only you, but your employees. Can you put a dollar amount on how much you're saving a year in property taxes if you would have, as compared to if you would have placed your facility that you built in Indiana in Bedford Park next to your other operations? I mean, how stark of a contrast is that?
So Bedford Park is a great place to do business. We still own a bunch of property there, and we're going to keep owning property there. And if you looked at Bedford Park 20 years ago to now, you can see the vast change they have. The hotel is the biggest one, but Bedford Park works with companies, and they've granted us 6Bs on almost every development we've done there. But even with the 6B, you're about 70 to 80 cents a square foot. Best day. In Indiana, this property was 36 cents a square foot. I've looked at other buildings in the area that are right around there, if not cheaper. I mean, it's surprising. It just reduces your overhead. It makes owning the real estate easier. It's not like constantly have that big weight of taxes. We just had an asphalt parking lot that got reassessed at 6 times last year's value.
Right.
in Cook County.
Yeah, and so half the cost in Indiana versus Bedford Park, and there's only so much that can be done at the municipal level. You still have essentially the county and the state problem, and that's essentially what you're highlighting. We're talking to Vincent Flaska. He's the new business development and property manager for Hoist Lift Truck. Was in Bedford Park, now in East Chicago, Indiana, as well as the CFO of the company, Dan Kassow. Gentlemen, we want to pick this up right after the break. Want to talk about just kind of manufacturing in general in Chicago, in East Chicago, and in the Midwest, and we'll do that right after this.